To just begin with what also is on the front page of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. Torture turning citizens against government, says Mufti. EU delegation visit MP Zake at Lubaga Hospital near private hospital. Private doctors also examine Bobi Wine. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda. Also, you can see there, journalists battered in line of duty, speak out. This also is on page 3 inside the Daily Monitor of Uganda. I want to show you also a related editorial cartoon that we do have from People Daily this morning. This has been drawn by Stano. Bobi Wine, this foolish fire can never burn a revolutionary. That is what he has drawn for us this morning. We want to turn back to our guest today. And of course, in light of the human rights violation, we can begin with you, Irungu Houghton, to just tell us, seeing what has been happening so far, as far as the journalists were battered, also to see Bobi Wine still, I think right now is given medical attention. He's been beaten black and blue, and we saw him also, coming into the court with, assisted by crutches. What is happening in Uganda?
I think the situation has spiraled to a point where it needs not just regional attention, but international attention. We've seen tremendous violence against the two members of parliament, Bobi Wine in particular, but also to the other 31 leaders from his home area.
Yes.
They attempted to place him into a military court that was condemned by the retired Supreme Court judge. We've seen European Union diplomats come in, and many Ugandan musicians speak with great concern about the treatment that he's going through at the moment. And I think the advisors of our Deputy President must be kicking themselves to have organized a visit at a time when it really is, it is time that we should all be isolating the government until it makes amends on this case. Amnesty International have declared both members of parliament are prisoners of conscience. So in this sense, Bobi Wine basically joins, Kenneth Matiba, people like Gitobu Manyara, and many of our own Kenyan heroes and national statesmen, if I can use that term. So I think for Kenyans, we need to be very concerned. What's interesting about this is that Kenyans have actually not slept through this trauma of the last week or so. Tonight at the Power 254, there is a concert in honor of Bobi Wine.
Yes.
Tomorrow there is a demonstration, a procession that's being organized, or a march that's being organized to the Ugandan High Commissioner to protest at the lowering of East African standards for democracy. So I think in many ways we can be proud of Kenyans that at a time like this they are standing with democracy in Uganda in a manner in which we hope that the President and the government will see fit to withdraw the intimidation and actually in many ways release unconditionally Bobi Wine and his colleagues. I should just mention, just the last thing is that Ugandans have been completely brave on this issue. I mean, there's a woman, I'm trying to remember her name, but I think it's Honorable Ingrid Turunawe, and her video went viral 2 days ago, and she basically was trying to get to church, and the military had placed lots of spikes across the road. Not once but twice did she get out of her vehicle and throw the spikes aside and continue to go to church. And she kept shouting, "I am not going to your home," to the chief commander. "I am going to church, and that is my right." And that kind of courage really gives us hope that Uganda will come through this stronger and much more reaffirmed that democratic societies are really the future. Autocratic states are like planes on autopilot. They operate, they continue. They're not able to adjust according to the weather. And I think what we will see if the state in Uganda is not able to autocorrect, that we might have a situation that this will spiral even further.
Thank you. And of course, we, in an interview with a local TV station before the MP's arrest, Dr. Besigye said that the young politician, this is Bobi Wine, cannot electorally defeat Museveni under current circumstances, suggesting that Dr. Besigye did not want to lose the main opposition politician tag. to the young Turk. And there is this bugbear and fear, especially with the young men right now who are rising and challenging the status quo, especially in East Africa, and one of which also is Dr. Peter Biara-Jack in South Sudan, who's still also in Islam as well. But let's just hear from Ambassador Erastus Mwencha.
You know, one of the things that President Museveni was credited for when he came to power in 1986 is improving the security situation in Uganda, which was really terrible under Amin. And the NRM was set up as a people's defense mechanism. In fact, it is through NRM that you ended up with what you can now call Uganda's People's Defense Force.
Yes.
But what is worrying is now the very army that brought all this security is now turning on the people and doing this kind of thing. But having said all that, and I want to agree with what Irungu has said, I saw some good news coming out of the army. They apologized to the people for what has happened. They have also promised to arrest all those army. So it remains to be done, to be seen what is going to be done. Now, having talked about the violence aspect, let's now turn to the politics. It must be informed by having changed the constitution and people now worried. President Museveni himself at one stage did say very clearly that if people don't have a mechanism for changing regimes peacefully, they can resort to, armed struggle. This statement is coming to haunt him. I think he should go back and really open space, allow this young generation. I mean, Bobi Wine is 30 years old. He was born when
35.
35. I mean, this is the guy now who's struggling to come to fame. And so you have a generational struggle here. And I think it's time that I think he's wise enough, he's courageous enough to call a conference and reset the country, because otherwise Uganda might be going in the wrong direction.
All right, so the concept of a generation exit that we were actually taken through here by Dr. Peter Biara-Jack is what is actually happening within the East African community right now. Generation exit, break the status quo. Let's have fresh blood also taking, the power mantle.
Yeah, first of all, while it may sound like Besigye might be afraid of Bobi Wine, I don't think he actually is. Bobi Wine cannot electorally defeat President Museveni under the current circumstances, but even when circumstances are actually great, just because of what we know about Ugandan structurally and the history of it. So he is not going to defeat President Museveni.
But looking at the parties, according to this news that we have, he arrived on the political scene by sweeping on to an easy victory a year ago in the by-election for Kyandondo East constituency in Wakiso near Kampala, in a result that was seen as a defeat for both the Besigye and Museveni's national resistance movement. And even going by this by-election they just had is the same scenario.
Yeah. Number one, we've always known, including this country, urban areas, and Kampala has never exactly been pro-Museveni. And there are certain areas that are always working with the opposition. You remember in 1992 election, I think Ford Asili swept Nairobi. But then, it lost a lot of people in the countryside. Now, just to try and perhaps answer Ambassador Mwencha's question, is wondering, I'll use some two quotes that Museveni made in two different times. In 1993, Museveni said, I have no sympathy for those who resist democracy. Power belongs to the people. If people don't want you, you should then go and do other things. That was in 1993. In 2017, here is Museveni. I'm not your servant, because this is what some people have been saying. I'm a freedom fighter, and if anybody thinks he employed me, he is deceiving himself. African leaders have this chameleon syndrome. They're in big-time turncoats. And what he's saying, he's changing in the light of changing circumstances. But changing circumstances because he's been powerful so long, and perhaps he thinks he hasn't achieved what he wanted, and he's not secure enough to even hand over or perhaps pave way to leave power. Now, it doesn't mean that just because people can still elect you, then you should be in power. We know Nyerere probably would have been re-elected again if he ran for president. Right. Barack Obama did mention that if I chose to run, he would actually have won. There's no way Donald Trump would have been Barack Obama. It was his third term. But to be able to leave a legacy, to leave something behind, it's incumbent upon leaders to pave a way for a new generation of ideas, not exactly of young people, because young people does not mean you have fresh ideas. We have some young people in this country who probably, they're in parliament, but I don't think they even know what standing orders are.
Yes.
You know, yeah. So we should not just be looking at, because Bobi Wine, he's very popular, but I also don't think he's very sophisticated when it comes to actually how to make laws in Uganda.
Correct.
Okay, so we need a new generation of young, of ideas, not just young people.
Correct.
You understand? And this is part of what I think Museveni is resisting. But of course, as he said, either you go, if you don't allow people to bring change by the ballot, they may bring change by the bullet. And if he continues, I think, pushing Ugandans in this direction, Uganda is going to become more violent. However, one of the promise that Irungu just mentioned about, you know, this lady who was very persistent, is this is something that has actually been lacking in Uganda. What is happening in Bobi Wine has been to BCG a million times. The organized civil society and principled citizens who are willing to pay the price, including death, to bring about change in Uganda. And that gives me hope.
Right, let's hear from Lucy.
I think there's a uniformity of the sort of consciousness that is in East Africa right now. They say that the best way to go is to use the wisdom of the old and the energy of the young. The sun must set, it must rise. We must just stick to the natural way in which even the world operates. You have your time, you let others have their time. But I think what we are having is this idea of just holding on to power and not being able to give it up when the time comes. And for me, this speaks a lot to probably the leadership personality that I think is so lacking in the world, regionally, you know, even in this country as well, where leadership is seen as something to be held onto and to feel safe, as opposed to a service that is provided for people for the purposes of prosperity. One of the people I admire the most, who I can, you know, think of right now at the top of my head, who I think was very courageous for his time, and I think any person in leadership can emulate, was General Tonje. I admire him greatly, and I hope to meet him and just, you know, sit at his feet. And he did something in the military during that time, which was seen as pretty radical, you know, saying, serve for a certain amount of time, set an objective, achieve your objective. You know, he said, you know, there are no women or men in the military. They are only service personnel. Let, you know, women marry, let them have their children, you know, just humanize the whole process. But it's interesting because I think most of the things he put in place were completely eradicated once he left,
yes.
Which is something I'm also seeing. Which is what, you know, people get rid of something because of the person who did it. It's just about not the merit of those things, but what the person stands for. Like what we are seeing Trump doing about what is happening with Obama. I don't know. I just feel like you can't be sure anymore about the people we elect in office, because when they want to be in office or they want these leadership positions, they align with us and we think we are together. Then when they get there, they change their minds. I don't know what people drink there. But of course, yeah, no, it's true. So what is happening in Uganda is not unique. And for me, I wish the people of Uganda all the best to just keep pushing. You can't put a civilian to a court-martial. Does their constitution allow that to happen?
Yeah, that's what the other question. Because
I mean,
of course,
the whole thing is ridiculous.
With Dr.
Yes.
Besigye, he's actually from the military in the first place. He's dead, right?
True.
Yeah?
Yeah.
For Bobi Wine, it doesn't make any lick of sense why he should actually be thrown into the military court.
But even for Besigye, it doesn't excuse it, because even at that time, he was already retired. So this is just flexing military might. So even as much as the military apologized, which is really cool, it's never been heard of before, let us see whether they're actually going to execute this court. I'm surprised at how fast it was put together, number one.
And for anyone who has actually been in the military court before, we know this person has been touted to be a very potentially, a person who's actually a big threat to the government when it was Besigye. So can we say the same also for Bobi Wine? Is he such a threat so far? Why should he be taken to the military court?
Debarl, I thought Museveni was more intelligent than what we're saying. Museveni is not reading the handwriting on the wall. Debarl, there are about 200 million young people in Africa right now, including Uganda, who some majority are desperate, majority want change, and change now. And this fellow has been there so long that yesterday was quoted, he can fight, you know, he fight Timothy. So here in Kenya, he can do this, he can do that. That time is over. And he needs to look at the transition, move on to take care of his farm and leave the government out for someone else. The issue of governance and corruption and everything else is taking us back to the Stone Age. Debarl, I participate on the Inter-University Council of East Africa. We have one of the most beautiful anthem for the East Africa community. We can do wonders. The East African trade, diplomacy, everything we can do. This whole region can move ahead as a package, as part of Africa. But so long as someone in Museveni's role as president of Uganda, we can't go any further.
We can't go any further. Right. Let's hear from Erastus Mwencha.
Yes, the professor's covered partly in the point I wanted to raise. And there are 2 points I wanted to raise. One is the security aspect and also the economic. Now, the security, Uganda has been occupying a very large space in this region. Because if you look at Uganda's role, whether it's in Somalia, South Sudan, whether it's in Rwanda, whether it's in Burundi or in DRC, and even Kenya, Uganda is a major player, and any instability in Uganda will affect this region in a very significant way. And I'm happy to hear what has happened in DRC, partially that President Kabila has announced that he's not going to contest again. That is really giving relief to the region. And I think we should start to see this kind of situation emerging, that you can have peaceful transition. You don't have to have this kind of contestation in the streets to change, because it affects the economy. And that's the next point I wanted to raise. Because if Uganda is destabilized, Kenya would be destabilized, because Uganda is a major trading partner for Kenya. Uganda is also an exit point for Kenya to go to countries like Rwanda, DRC, and the rest. And so our economy will also be affected. It is of Kenya's interest to see Uganda move out peacefully in this kind of situation. And so I think we shouldn't just look at it and say, well, it is next door. It is really our house also burning.
Right. Dr. Khannenje.
Yeah, I think what Irungu alluded to, what Kenyans and average Kenyans are doing to be their brother's keeper for the neighboring country is very encouraging.
Yes.
That we can be able to speak for those sometimes who may not be speaking for themselves or do not have the space to do that. So I think this should continue until Bobi Wine is released from prison.
Right, and I'll be remiss if you don't also show this particular picture of Yoweri Museveni and Deputy President William Ruto. And of course here, was he receiving now the Lifetime Achievement Award that we have on the screen right now? And him also going to Uganda at this time when I think things are not really looking very flowery, a very tense country right now. What would be your comment, Lucy Mukuria? Ruto being in that particular country, receiving this Lifetime Achievement Award, I think because you know what is most consternating is the fact that there was a forum for the young people, and yet the young people are the young people having the picture of Bobi Wine in mind is how they're being castigated in that country. Don't you think this was sort of an oxymoron?
I've already spoken on it and said, you know, that the advisors to the Deputy President must be at this point kicking themselves because this was probably the worst weekend to go visit. And particularly, as you said, to attend a youth summit in a context where youthful leadership are being criminalized and brutalized. I guess one of the things I would have expected in that space is really a firm diplomatic statement from the Deputy President on what was happening. And that would have reassured me that the visit would have been worth its while. Perhaps private conversations to call on the President of Uganda to, as Erastus Mwencha has mentioned, you know, to really bring some normalcy and some democratic stability back to the political space that is Uganda. In the absence of any evidence that this happened, I think I can just come back to the the sense that, and actually it's interesting there, there's a tweet there that talks about projects in Kenya stalling and the Deputy President going to Uganda to launch new projects. So maybe our projects have now regionalized, but I think it's with a light touch. It's with a light touch. I mean, I think in the absence of really a strong statement by the Deputy President in Uganda, one's left unsure what was the purpose of the mission. But I think the focus really is not on the Deputy President's visit, it's really on the concern that all Kenyans and all regional citizens must have in terms of what's going wrong in Uganda currently.
All right, so the freedom of the media, because I think journalists also have been battered, beaten black and blue in Uganda. We can talk about that briefly before we also move on to other topics. Lucy?
I mean, of course,
the freedom of expression, especially in Uganda, it has not been, given that room to swing their cart in full, if I may say so.
Yeah, like it's interesting to think about, to expect that a firm diplomatic statement against what is happening can be made, because I think the truth is that there is a silent agreement within shared among the regional leaders that this, do unto me as you'd want me to do unto you. That is the silent agreement that is there. So I don't think we are going to be getting that sort of statement coming out. As far as is concerned, is like, that's your beef, you take care of it the best way that you know, so that even me, when I have that kind of a situation, don't come telling me, Jirani, please, nyorosha hii, this is my house.
Let me challenge Lucy a little bit more. I mean, that may be an agreement among them in the bathrooms, they're mostly male leaders, so maybe as they are doing their business, they have this agreement, don't call me out if I brutalize my journalist.
Yes.
I won't call you out.
Yes.
But I think, Erastus Mwencha is probably the best person to speak about this, because I think the thing that for me fundamentally indicates a departure from the Organization of African Unity and the African Union is really this principle of non-indifference, right? And actually, as we're remembering Kofi Annan, the right to, what is it called, the right to protect, the responsibility to protect, was really something that emerged during Kofi Annan's time, that actually we cannot turn a blind eye, we cannot close our eyes in a situation where our neighbors are burning. And I think, the bathroom agreement is one thing, but I think we now have a diplomatic principle that says, no, it is not acceptable for you to allow your neighbor citizens to be brutalized while you are able to speak out on this issue.
And I agree with you, but let's look at the reality of things. Even right now, the people standing up for Ugandans are your everyday Kenyans. Not anybody in government. I'm just making an observation. I'm not saying that, You're
not justifying it.
Yes, I'm not justifying it. I'm just making an observation. So, of course, until that time comes when, there can be enough moral courage to call each other out, but to also make peace, then maybe we'll have something going on.
The bathroom rules will prevail.
inaitangwa ati locker room talk,